Right, I think we are ready to get started. So thank you everyone for joining us this morning. We usually do these in the afternoon, my time at least, but as we have people coming in from Asia and China, we figured we'd do something in the morning so we could have a different group of people coming and joining us to discuss publishing in China on this, the PocketGamer.biz roundtable session. China remains one of the biggest markets in mobile games. And is hugely popular and hugely difficult to get into, I think, for a lot of people who are sort of coming at it from outside of the region. And also, it's sort of been in the news recently because of Apple and its new approach to approval numbers and the ISBN, as it's sometimes referred to. And so, yeah, we'll get on to all sorts of topics. But first of all, I'd like to let my panelists introduce themselves. So we'll start with Owen. If you could just tell us a little bit about who you are and what your company does and all that sort of stuff.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. So I'm Owen. I am the founder of eFlat. It's a advisory consultancy that I help developers pitch to publishers in China. So I help developers manage their entry into China. Yep.
Cool. Antti?
Hello, my name is Antti and I'm from My Games. And at My Games, we're offering value services for content providers, publishers, studios to go and tackle the Chinese mobile market, specialized on Android with our own SDK to cover the top marketplaces, and also lots of other services that we can help our clients with.
Cool. Vivian? Oh, sorry, Vivian, we can't hear you. No, unfortunately not yet.
How about now?
Yes, that's perfect.
Yep.
Hello, everyone. I'm Vivian. I'm the senior publishing manager from Joypack. So we are the hyper-casual mobile publisher from both West and East. So we call it like truly global.
Cool, thank you. And Gabriel?
Hi, I'm Gabriel. I'm the founder of Merfolk Games, a game development studio in Hong Kong and Shanghai.
Lovely. Thank you, everybody. So yeah, as I said, we're going to talk about all sorts of things to do with China and publishing, but I always like to get a good overview of the topic first. So kind of my first question is, how has China's mobile games market changed in the first half of 2020? And that doesn't necessarily have to have been a big change. It doesn't have to be anything huge, but how is the market currently looking and what's new and what's interesting? Anybody feel free to jump in on that.
Okay, so I think that the biggest differences that we have seen now in our side are that there are lots of concentration from the Chinese government on how to observe players and make sure that their well-being of youth is in place. So what this has meant on a regulation, that there are something called like real name registration, which is now closely followed, and to kind of find out who is actually playing the game. And then there are some anti-addiction requirements that we've seen, and to basically follow on the playtime players are playing. So this is something that I think has affected on also lots of the playtime that games are receiving, because youth and young players are not able to spend so much time anymore online, and I think that's been one of the big things that we have seen in China now.
Yep. Owen, if you want to.
Yep. Oh yeah. So yeah, I guess the thing on everyone's mind is ISBN, the application. Although that has been around for years, in 2016, it's basically the implementation that's getting ever more strict. So I guess for the early part of this year, the main thing is that Apple has announced, getting more and more strict. on the ISBN, where even local companies has a huge impact on the local market, especially on the UA side. So what I'm saying about the UA side, I guess we can talk about this a bit later, is that the top 200 companies who are actually doing UA and paying and buying UA and like getting that all market going, about 60% of those do not have an ISBN. So yeah, 60% of the top 200 who are actually paying for UA. So when that hits in August, that actually is gonna have an effect. So everyone's sort of like in a scramble mode for the first half of 2020.
Yes, that is very correct, and I heard like a number that 50% of the top 100 iOS top grossing games are going to be cut off end of this month. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, but that's going to have a huge effect on the revenue Apple is going to make in the market.
Yep. Well, it's bad news for all those who are already in the market. It's good news for everyone who are not in the market yet.
Welcome.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
That is true. That is true. And all the players who basically got their ISBN in a good time, they are now going to benefit from that.
Vivian, anything you'd like to add? Oh, I think we've lost you again.
We are mainly for hyper casual games, so that's why I think for the in-game purchase, it's not like that critical to us, And I can also suggest for a lot of market player, then you can consider like first launch it without IAP, and then test it through to see if it works to apply at the meantime, That's also a good alternative way to enter to the Chinese market without, hassling that much yet.
Cool. Gabriel, anything you've seen new and interesting in the Chinese market?
Yeah, I mean, some things haven't changed too much, like which genres are popular, but I think what we've seen in terms of market share is the emergence of TikTok's parent company, ByteDance. They've been making a lot of money around the world, actually. And so they've been kind of emerging in the past few months as a pretty big player in the game market.
Cool. Actually, speaking on the topic of genres, like obviously you said that it's not changed what genres are popular, but what genres are most popular still in the region that developers should be looking at if they want to publish their game in China?
Yeah, I think casual gaming is definitely the big market share of China's gaming market for mobile. We also have some popularity of MOBAs, battle royales, some anime games and card games like Hearthstone. But I think in general, casual is definitely king.
Yep, especially casual with PvP elements or like social elements in it. Yep.
Definitely.
Yeah, basically everything with PvP or social element, MMO, casual. So casual PvP is more like Slither.io, along those lines, or even like Brawl Stars. I would consider them like casual MOBA with PvP element. Yeah, and of course all the shooting games, like which is Tencent. I think number one game is it's called Heping. I'm not sure what the English name is. It's basically the PUBG version, China PUBG. Yeah, that's still number one.
Yeah, and MOBAs like Honor of Kings is huge, but maybe this is kind of like if you're entering the market, it's not going to be easy to do with the MOBA. So casual games, I think it's easier. Then I also heard some statistics that the RPG games are actually still one of the biggest genres played in mainland China, and which is great. I respect everybody who plays RPGs.
Yep.
And Vivian, you're obviously more interested in hyper casual. How is that? Is there like a very specific kind of hyper casual game that's doing well? Is hyper casual evolving in China, or is it staying pretty much the same?
So far, we didn't see any changes, to be honest, for this coming like a quarter or something. And so far, it's still like the same genres. For example, idle games, so I would say, but usually it's like a action adventure kind of, and also the regular like really the most hyper casual, you know.
Mm. Cool.
Like that.
Cool. And yeah, so something we haven't really, we talked about the different things that are changing and everything like that, but across the world, obviously there's been the global pandemic and that's had a horrible effect on society in the world. But in mobile games, it seems to have like increased revenues just around the world. Is that still true of China as well? Are we seeing like increased revenues in that region? Anyone willing to?
Yes, I think the answer is yes. So at least like in our games, we have been able to see considerable growth. I think Tencent, like when comparing to 2019 from the same time, they went up 31%. So that's a remarkable kind of elevation in the playtimes. Then something else that we have seen in our games is that the peak times has basically kind of plateaued, that people play all the time more. And usually it is that on weekends you see the kind of curve pop up. So I think that the people are maybe playing every day like it's a weekend.
Is that just during the lockdown period, or is that over like even after the lockdown period? Do you see like it peak all the time?
No, I think that the lockdown period was more like you could see this more clearly. Now when there is schools started again, we started to see those peaks kind of coming back. So basically, I think that this was the early 2020 when we went into this kind of phase, and now we're. I believe that we are moving towards to the normal situation little by little.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that's the case for most people. Yeah.
So we kind of touched on this, but we do have a question from the audience, and obviously, if you are in the audience, please do drop in questions in the Q&A section. China's now had a few good months of the post-peak COVID life, while much of the West is still in lockdown. How is the local market faring on metrics like downloads, retention, and spend compared to lockdown months? Like you're saying, obviously it's not as noticeable, Antti, as during the lockdown period, but is it still like an increase overall? Has the lockdown changed habits in the market? And do you think these kinds of trends are something that we'll see in the rest of the world?
That is going to be interesting to see. I think it's too early now to make like a clear assessment on how the market is going to develop for the future. But I would assume that play habits can be a little bit different in China than in the Western world, but still people play mobile games quite actively when they are engaged. So I think there might be some parts of it that will translate to the Western world, but it kind of remains to be seen how that will play out.
Sort of slightly related to that, although it's not post-COVID, I think it's also interesting to see the post-ISBN. I think we mentioned like post-ISBN, which is 1st August, when Apple do pull all the games down, how that will affect the games that already have ISBN, and how those games, in terms of retention, span, like how those will fare.
By the way, if somebody doesn't know what ISBN is the governmental license that is required for you to publish a game in Chinese Android marketplaces. This has been for a long time a requirement on Android side, and now as Apple has changed their rules, then ISBN governmental license will also be there required.
Vivian, I think you were trying to say something, but we're having some issues with your mic. Sorry.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think if you just lean a bit closer to your microphone, that might help a lot, actually.
Yeah, because I'm actually using this, but anyway,
Okay.
I think some connection issues.
I see.
I hope you guys can hear me though. Yeah, for hyper casual games, actually we do see like in China, this pandemic period, actually our revenue is up, you know, compared with global field, let's say,
yeah.
which is very interesting, you know. Although, you know, we are still trying to figure out like the most like deeper, but so far, if I'm talking with the market and talking with other publishers, friends, you know, we also see like in Asia, in China, this impact has been more than the global market for now.
Cool. So sort of moving on from like looking at the market, well, not quite moving on, but another sort of facet of it, because I think looking into China, it's kind of from the outside, it can seem very confusing and difficult to get into. But so I'm wondering, I'm going to throw it to you, Gabriel, on this one, because we haven't heard from you in a little bit. What do you think are some of the common mistakes and misconceptions people make regarding the Chinese mobile games market?
So I think something that's really big in China is the speed at which you are able to get the game out there. So for example, if there's a game that's really popular and suddenly it's ranked as one of the top 10 games in the US, you can expect that game to have a Chinese copy within a month. And that there's this really small window of time where you hit popularity in the West. You have a small window of time before someone creates the product faster than you could for the Chinese market. So I think planning ahead, and if you know, if a game company does plan to eventually get to the Chinese market, definitely planning ahead of time and expecting this to happen could save a lot of money on the developer's part.
Yes, I agree with Gabriel. Like as we are trying to build these long-term relationships with our partners, when we have been working for a longer time, we of course hear from their project beforehand, and then we can basically start the application process for the ISBN a little bit earlier. So we can get to the market before it's too late. As Gabriel said, that there will be copycats and all of this, but I think that the current waiting time for the license is like over a year. So even if you do the quickest way possible, you're still going to be late on that few months that you mentioned. But then again, we also believe that the studio that has made the original good idea, the game mechanics and optimization is going to be better than the copycat. So usually it plays out that these original games actually do pretty well when they get to the marketplace, even though if there is like somebody who already kind of went and tried to steal your fame.
Yep.
I believe no one can actually.
I agree with Antti.
Yeah, I
sorry.
think.
Yeah,
I think no one can really steal your nuance of the game, you know. So don't worry about that. I think also on the ranking wise, like the keywords wise, they already pick up yours, you know, and also the content as well. So I don't think it's a huge issue.
Yeah. Any other mistakes that people make when they go into the market, or any misconceptions people might have about it? Owen?
I don't know. I think as time progresses, people going to conferences like Pocket Gamer Connect and different conferences and meeting publishers, I think people started to have more of an idea of how China is.
Mm-hmm.
And their knowledge base is growing and growing, especially when they talk to other developers or talk to publishers. So I guess everyone knows the ISBN, everyone knows the Android market is fragmented, but not too fragmented as before. I guess one of the misconceptions is that people think that still like 20 to 30 over big app store markets. There's still over like a lot of app store, Android app stores, but the ones that are important that covers the distribution widely is mainly the top 4 or 5, like Oppo, Vivo, Huawei, Xiaomi, Tencent. So it's sort of, from the publishing perspective, it's a bit simpler because they need to focus on the big app stores. Another update is probably in terms of user acquisition in the West. It's very mature, and in China, it's sort of picking up, and it's actually growing very fast. Like people are doing a lot of user acquisition, but I would say this is quite recent in the past like 2 or 3 years. Previously, it's mostly through the app stores, but now a lot of user acquisitions, which is why it's a huge like DOA market there right now.
So actually, Owen, that's something really interesting about how the UA has evolved. Like I have an understanding that ByteDance with the TikTok offering has developed this, like basically pushing the UA quality forward. Have you had the same experience that like this is something that is going to fundamentally change the UA in during 2020?
I think, yeah, like the top UA platforms are Tencent and ByteDance. And then you have the second, that's the first tier. And then the second tier is UC, Baidu, and what do you call it, Kuaishou. And then there's like one tier below that. But in terms of UA, like everyone is, just doing UA on these platforms. And that's why they're bidding the prices up. But I think when we talk to UA, I guess we have to let Vivian talk about that, since hyper casual is all UA. So maybe we can hear from Vivian what the how the UA scene is there, like on some specifics.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, I hope you guys can hear me clean. Like clear.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was about to jump in actually. So we are using a lot of Mint Grow. You know, I think you guys are familiar with Mint Grow, right? And Mint Grow has been one of our primary partner for global publishing and the China publishing. Actually, they are doing pretty good. I think they are now like a top 3 networks or something like that in even global market is in China specifically very good. So, and after that, we of course we also try other network as well. But we see that Mint Grow has given us like the most stable and the best performance so far, like a conversion rate. Yeah, I definitely suggest for that. And not only for hyper casual games, but also for like a little bit mid-core games, like a casual with a little bit more like a content that works very well as well.
Cool. As you're saying, Owen, I think as you say, like a few people, more people now understand the market a bit better. They know what's going on. They know everything about the fragmentation of the Android market, as you say. Should developers still, like Western developers, still be working with a Chinese publisher to get into the market, or has it become easier now to not do that?
I guess if you want to get into the China market, that's the only way. You have to work with a China publisher, or like depending what you want. So when I consult my clients, end of the day, it depends on what sort of vision or what sort of strategy the client, the developer has for China. Do they want to get into China, just make a quick buck? Do they view China as a long-term play? Do they have some old games they want to sell off? Do they want to co-develop the games with Chinese publisher? So that I guess there are a lot of different options. But end of the day, if you want to do anything in China, especially when you apply for ISBN, you have to if you want to do China properly, you have to go with a publisher, someone like My Games or Joypack, or some publishers. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, fair enough. So okay, so on that front, what kinds of developers and games are publishers such as Anti, like what kind of games and developers are you looking to work with when you're publishing a game in China?
So from games, we usually like to work with studios that already have like a proven track record, so that we can basically measure the metrics beforehand and kind of see that, okay, this is something that our customers would enjoy in China. And of course, we do like a rigorous evaluation process for the product. That first we look at the metrics, and then we look at the game itself and kind of test it on a local market, like how does local people react to this type of game, and then otherwise I don't think that there is a lot of something that we would say no to. Of course, like there are some regulations that don't allow, like we can't have horror games or something, casino games, slot machines, this kind of stuff, betting games. So those are, of course, immediately cut off, that we cannot get live in China. But otherwise, like you can have a coloring book application, you can have a RPG game or a match 3 game. It's a market that can benefit from many genres and have popularity.
Cool. And Vivian, I guess obviously Joypack is focused largely on hyper casual. What kind of developers are you looking to work with when you're thinking of publishing a game? Oh, sorry, we've lost your audio again.
Trying to fix it, actually. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry for that. Not my day.
No.
Okay. So basically, of course, for the matured studio at West, and we found many, and we're still working with many of the developers who has made a lot of great game themselves. So we call it like matured cooperation. And otherwise, we actually also, Joypack is also giving fundings to those developers who's having like potentials, and then we can also help them to build up the team even, and we can also give the game idea and the test through, and helping a developer to ensure that they will get to publish the game. So by early testing and those kind of things.
Cool. Great. So
yep.
we kind of.
Sorry, can I join?
Oh yeah, no,
quick?
absolutely. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so yeah, in addition to, like, of course, publishers, like, they need to look at metrics. In addition to that, I think after talking with a few publishers, of course, every different publishers, they are looking for different type of genres that fit their portfolio. But all in all, I think what they see that they themselves lack in China is the ability to create unique gameplay. So that's what they value a lot from developers from the West, from US, from Europe, is the ability to create unique gameplay and unique graphics. And that's what they are looking at. In terms of the meta game, I think it's good to have, but the Chinese, they trust their own ability to build a meta game around unique gameplay. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gabriel, any thoughts on your end as a developer?
Yeah, I think from what I understand, it seems like publishers in China it's easier for them to work with games that are already successful in the West. Just to make it just kind of like it's an easier bet for the Chinese market if it already has kind of name brand recognition, because people in China aren't ignorant to, the kinds of the popular games, that like the ranked games in the US or in the UK. So they're a lot of the time they're kind of eager and waiting for a China release of a popular game. So I think for that reason, developers will definitely be more, accepting and excited about games that are already successful.
Yeah. This is true, Gabriel. Like, for example, Hill Climb Race, which was a global success, and when we got that one going in China, it's 480 million players. That's like absolutely amazing. Like, like every European playing the game. But I'm really sure, because how fast it got started, they already knew about it and they wanted to play it, and then it just got running.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So yeah, so we kind of touched on this already a little bit. I think we can go a little bit deeper into the end sort of thing. So as it's been a thing for Android already, and that's sort of affected it. But now, as of August 1st, Apple will start removing games from the or it doesn't have the ISBN or approval number or whatever you choose to call it. I think we'll stick with ISBN because it's simpler for everyone here. Is this going to have a particularly big impact on the market, do we think? If when these games are removed, when the whole program is iOS? Feel free to.
Sorry, you broke up a bit.
Oh, sorry. Mine's not the finest. Sorry. So yeah, Apple removing the ISBN, removing games that don't have an ISBN but do have in-app purchases. Is this going to have a big impact on the market? Do we think?
Yeah, I think it's going to have.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes.
Sorry, Gabriel, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to have a huge impact. It's essentially going to kill off a lot of indie publishers and indie studios, because it's basically going to be impossible to produce iPhone games if you're a tiny company and you don't have a collaboration with a large publisher or local publisher. So yeah, it's going to be definitely very difficult for small studios.
Yeah, I would like to divide that into two parts, like players and studios. So basically, Chinese local studios, as Gabriel is enjoying of this status, can get the license quite quickly. So basically, for Western studios, the problem is now that the disadvantage on getting to the marketplace. But then if we are thinking about players' point of view in China, that's not going to be as huge. Maybe there is going to be a little bit less Western games, but still the local studios basically can get their games quite quickly on the marketplace. So I think that the biggest change from this Apple's change is going to be felt outside of China.
Yeah, one thing I guess that's not really sort of in the radar of Western developers is that in China, there's this thing called a reskin game, where a single game with a single ISBN, the developer will sort of reskin that game into like 4 or 5 different variations of the same game. So apparently that has been a problem for Apple because it's basically users will be sort of like diluted through these games, or like the developer will use like 4 variations of the same game to do UA. So once the ISBN comes crackdown, so actually a lot of talk in the China community is that, you know, how this will affect how the reskin game is going to affect the market, which is because because the reskin games are on the App Store without the ISBN. So this is actually a positive for the game market itself, because you're sort of getting rid of sort of the bloated, slightly bloated ecosystem. So, and then maybe in the short term, UA price is going to come down. you have a lot more space for developers for unique games, new original games, because otherwise the market is sort of bloated with reskin versions of different games. So that's a slightly positive note for ISBN. Slight positive. Yeah.
Vivian, as far as I understand it, this isn't really going to impact the hyper-casual market because they are only led by ads and that's not covered by the ISBN. Is that correct?
I think it won't be a huge impact, like let's say like this way. Although some hyper-casual game would also rely on in-game purchase, basically, but it's not the weight is very light. Let's say only like a 3%, 5%. So that's what I said earlier. You can basically leave out it and see if later it works to apply the license for that.
Mm.
And on the other hand, by the way, for a lot of developers, I actually gave them a lot of a suggestion on replacing purchasing item to reward video, so that makes also huge differences in terms of the monetization if they have it, and also the game design turning to more positive way, right? So
yeah. If I understand correctly, the reward videos is like one of the most popular way of monetization at the moment.
Yeah. Question for Vivian. So ad-based game is still okay for ISBN now, or do you hear any news that in the future that's going to be a problem for even ad-based games?
I don't think so, but I have to say, in terms of the China publishing, for Android, can be still a good opportunity for a lot of developers who wants to enter China, because Android channel, we at least from our games, some of the Android games actually earning more than the iOS actually.
Mm.
So, and if you because you need to find a local partner anyway, so I would say that find a local partner who can also distribute Android game for you, so you can do a package deal. So for developer, it's gonna be like a one done and win for the whole both market.
On our side, Owen, we are looking at this closely, and as we can see that the regulation is tightening all the time. So I don't know. It's hard to predict the future, but I think that it is possible that the ad revenue will be considered to be under earning games, like the regulation states. Like if you read the regulation, it should already be like that, but for some reason it's not. And it's kind of interesting to see that are they going to address it or are they going to let it slide? So it's going to be interesting to see. And that's going to be a huge change on the market if they require the government license for the also ad-funded games.
Yep, got it.
And so obviously this is going to affect quite a few developers. Is there anything that they can be doing now with their games in China to either stop this from happening or to weather the storm if they're about to lose revenues? I've seen a suggestion somewhere that like developers should just start removing all their in-app purchases and replace it all with ads. Is that actually an effective method, or is that not going to help very much?
For the hyper casual games or casual kind of games, I do suggest developer to start to consider when they design the game, in terms of monetization, replacing ads or something. But for hardcore or mid-core game, I suggest to find a really good local partner who already have this kind of base, to help you go through the pipeline and application for license and so on, already at the beginning.
Yeah.
Don't say later, but beginning,
Yeah, I agree with Vivian on this one. Like the best kind of approach to the Chinese market is to think about five years, like a long-term plan. I started with getting the license, and then I get my game live and optimized with the monetization. It's a huge market. It can be as much revenue as US for your company. So just if you started with China, do it properly, and don't try to do it quick and easy, and kind of focus on it, and it will pay off. That's that we have seen this. It will pay off.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. In addition to that, so I think one of the changes that previously you have a game, and then if you want to go to China, you just go and you start figuring things out. I guess the main change for a lot of developers right now is just sort of retweak their internal process, that when you start making a game, you just start thinking about China, and you can actually start the application process before you finish the game. So I think a lot of maybe people are thinking, oh, I should finish the game and then start the application process. But actually, you didn't hear it from me. No one heard it from me. So you can just start the application process when you have like a build that's sort of low final, and then you can do it in parallel. You can build the game out like in a year, and then have the application going in a year as well.
Yeah. At least like a safe bet is a soft launch build is totally ready for that to start applying.
And on that sort of note, we do have a question from the audience. So asking what the numbers are of like approvals that are currently waiting, and sorry, so I think it's like the numbers of like how long does it actually take to get through the application process? Has this sped up at all? Does anybody have any idea how long the backlog is? Like, how, if you are going to go that route, how long is it actually going to take before you get to the point where you can release your game in China?
So
well, everyone's always saying it's around 6 to 9 months. But backlog is growing, definitely.
Yeah, that's correct. Like, but this year we have only seen 2 batches of approved games come in. So, and I think that there are applications are going to grow now because of the Apple situation, and it's going to be interesting to see how the government can kind of address this demand. At the moment, what we're estimating is that it's from 12 to 18 months to get the ISBN approved for a foreign developer, and then of course the local studios can do it in, I think, 3 months or something like that.
3 to 6 months.
3 to 6 months. Thank you, Bibi.
Sorry, just getting my head together here. And with that kind of idea in mind of it's going to take 12 to 18 months to actually get your game in China, is it still worth it? I mean, Antti, you've already sort of said that it is, but is it actually still worth it? Like the cost of getting that application, the cost of localizing the game, will it actually pay off for Western developers to get their games into China?
Yes, I think it does. Like I like to put it that way, that if you have confidence in your game, then don't go shopping for minimum guarantees and this kind of stuff. Just go and find a good partner that will take your game to the marketplace with good planning, and you will see the revenue. Like it's basically like entering to another Europe. And this marketplace just has this little step that you first have to take, and the 12 months, that's not a long time when we think about it. 12 months is 12 months. It goes like this, and your game is live. So I think that that if I have a confidence on my product, I would most definitely want to offer it for Chinese players also.
Any other thoughts on that? Sorry.
Yeah. So, well, I think personally, I think it depends on the developers, on the size in particular. So because like if you're a smaller studio, then you need to prioritize better. Then I guess if you're a bigger studio and you have more risk-taking power, then China is easier. It's sort of a no-brainer. It's like, why not? Whereas if you're a smaller studio, then you just need to strategize better. Not to say that you shouldn't, but it's more like what type of offers that you're looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with Owen over there that when a studio is trying to basically focus on making the best game possible, and then if your CEO is basically running the ISBN kind of a cooperation and partnership, it takes a lot of power from the actual core work. So it is good to have like a little bit more established studio to go to the market.
Oh, sorry, Vivian, we can't hear you.
So basically, from what I can compare with global publishing and the China publishing, actually, regarding to the timeline, I would say it's more or less similar, even including China is applying for the license and so on, because we also did that, you know, because one game, when you test it and already see the good result, then you should already start to prepare that. As a local studio, we Joypack also has local office in Beijing, a local entity. So that means that we can already start to prepare those documents and so on to apply this license, you know, for the developers. And then, you know, 3 to 6 months, then we are actually 3 months, maybe we soft launch and testing the market without IAP, you know, and then after that, we just on time to hit up and then scale up to the LTV and so on. Actually, it's just really on time. I don't think it's critical in terms of the timeline, right, Andy?
Yeah, that's true. When you're looking at it realistically, how the publishing process goes, it's not like the 12 months go that we are just sitting and fiddling with our thumbs. There's actually a lot of stuff to do.
You need
that's
it,
true.
Right? Sometimes, yeah.
Cool. So we're going to take a couple of questions from the audience now. And Gabriel, this one's for you. So you kind of mentioned that the ISBN thing is going to be sort of the death of indie games in China. What is the current state of play of indie games in China? Is there a strong and growing indie-based scene, or you know how much of that is actually going to be felt in the wider industry, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think for mobile, not really. To be honest, I think there are like a lot of indie studios making, you know, casual games and things like that. But I think China's still very much dominated by kind of like bigger companies when it comes to the mobile gaming industry.
So I guess it's going to have a wider impact more on sort of PC games and that kind of thing outside of mobile.
I think it's going to have a bigger impact on foreign indie studios who kind of have an idea of publishing in China. I think those are going to be people who are hit hardest for sure. I think, you know, because I think indie game studios within China will kind of be okay, but it's going to be difficult for entering the China market, but don't necessarily have a giant company with the funds to kind of back it up, the funds and the time.
And so, just as a general sort of question, I believe that if I'm correct on this, the approval process, it doesn't sort of break it down into we're going to approve X number of mobile games, X number of PC games. Switch is going to be involved in that now. Are we going to see like a wider knock-on effect, do we think, of the rest of the games industry now that iOS mobile games are part of this approval process?
Right. I mean, last year we saw a massive backlog and a freeze for months, and no one really knew. It's very opaque. The system is very opaque. It's hard to research the exact numbers and the approval process. You just kind of have to try and wait and see. Try again.
Yes, and the applications are divided in 3 parts. Mobile platforms is one. Then console has its own, and PC has its own. So I believe that these departments are also maybe running individually. So the mobile department is most definitely going to have the heaviest impact on this one. But console and PC, I think they're just going to keep as they've been keep going this far.
Cool. We've got another one here, and this one, stay with you, Antti, for this one, because someone's saying that 480 million players for Hill Climb is huge, which it is, fantastic. What sort of player engagement and or revenues are needed to be in the top 10 in China? Is it even possible to be in the top 10 in China if you're not Tencent or NetEase?
So I think I just had a conversation about this, that it's really, really hard to tackle those kind of games and genres that are there in the top 10. Like we see like Arena of Valor type of game, and like Tencent is there, and a lot of games that we also know from being popular from the Western market. So for you to get into the top 10 is absolutely amazing, and it requires a lot of luck also. If you are not one of the big players at the moment.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on getting into the top 10? Like, how big your game really needs to be from anybody else?
I think, yeah, just looking around, like, so I'm in Shanghai, and when you look around in the market, the ones who have top 10 are at the level with celebrity endorsements. So that's the level that they're playing at. TVC, celebrity endorsements, around the clock live ops teams, huge amount of investment being poured in. I guess it's, yeah, in terms of the amount of effort and money, it's really big. But
yeah, we're talking about NFL, like it's just huge.
But I guess the key, I guess it's great to look at top 10, but even just looking at top 100 is it's a big market. Yeah.
I agree with you, Owen. Basically, that we also see that although top ranking is like a really great thing, but in terms of the revenue, sometimes it's not a necessary deal. Like the top 10 is earning much more, right? Depends how you boost it.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I would still say to developers, the product is the most important thing. If your game is great, don't be afraid.
That's true.
We have another question here, and then I'm going to go to sort of a final thing. But from the audience, where are Chinese publishers focusing their efforts aside from the domestic market? Is the Western market still a massive target, or is there more focus on Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia? What kind of areas are we looking outside of China?
So I think if we're talking about game developers, there's definitely, because of the newly introduced rules and regulations, there's definitely been a huge push for game developers in China to look outside of China. And usually the first stop is other Chinese language regions. So Taiwan is kind of the easiest market, and Singapore, as well as Hong Kong to a certain extent. And kind of after like taking the first steps outside of China to Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Macau, they then do other Asian markets. So maybe Japan and Korea. And if they're feeling very risky, they'll try pushing for the U.S. or European or American market. And so I've personally seen a huge flood of Chinese game ads on my Facebook feed with interesting English. But you can actually tell in the past year that there's been a huge effort on local domestic firms who suddenly, they've been catering to a 1 billion strong market, suddenly trying to go global and pushing ads to Europe, America, and the rest of Asia for sure.
I think that Arena of Valor is one of these interesting kind of examples that was a huge hit in China, and still is like one of the most played game of all the games in China. And when they brought it to the Western markets, there was I would say semi serious kind of effort to get it up and running. But they were, I think they were a little bit hesitant that will this be good for this market, and of course eventually it was discontinued, so it didn't reach the metrics that they were planning. But I think that fundamentally the let's say Europe and US, there are a lot of players who are playing these games with a PC or a console. And in China, there are a lot of people who don't have these devices. They have mobile devices, but they want to play MOBAs, so they can actually benefit from that. But so there are like these big differences on the market. They're trying, and sometimes they're failing, sometimes they succeed. So it is interesting to see what China can bring to the Western markets in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting that these difficult situations have really pushed Chinese game companies to go global. And I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot more, failures, but also a lot of successes of Chinese companies entering the Western market. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and I think that it's good for the whole ecosystem because it brings more diversity, because it's coming from a different place, different mentality. So new kind of games like we've been enjoying for 4 decades, Japanese games, and they are developed in a very certain way, and people absolutely love them. So maybe Chinese can build this kind of own development style in the future.
One thing to add. One thing to add is in terms of media narratives, looking at all the Chinese game media, it's very heavily focused on Western market. Like every month or every week, they're gonna have a post. So and so, which company is making so much money in the West? So and so, which company is with which title is making money in the West? But usually revolves around and they have a ranking about. So they always sort of try to. The narrative is like, okay, these guys are making it in the West. So you guys should step up the game. I think that's sort of the narrative in China. I think apart from the holy grail is US and Europe, but then Japan and Korea is next, and then of course Southeast Asia. Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Vivian. We were trying to say something.
No. I just said after NT, I said I feel those type of Chinese game is also coming as well. Because I do also see in Asia, not only China, but in Asia in general, the game quality is also coming up, and also they also have their unique gameplay and also the IP and so on. So, I think that's another trend as well.
Cool. We're just coming up on time now, but we're kind of on to the discussion of sort of what's coming for the future of China and Chinese games. Do you have any other? Does anyone have any other predictions about the future of the mobile games market in China or Chinese developers as a whole that we haven't already covered?
I think it's gonna the trend of Chinese games is that the quality is improving quite rapidly, and I think it will continue to improve at an accelerated pace for all the quality of the Chinese games, either the ones that stay in China or the ones that are going global.
I think overall quality product gameplay is the core, and you don't really have to think about even localization, I would say sometimes, if you design the game very well, a kid can just simply pick up and then play it. That's the best experience.
Antti or Gabriel, any other predictions for the future of China and mobile games?
I imagine indie studios and smaller studios kind of struggling with regulations as they get tighter and tighter. So I think in the next few years, you'll probably see some bigger game companies kind of buying out smaller game companies. So in terms of the developer side, that's kind of what I'm imagining will happen. And I think I don't think that you'll see a lot of you know, straight up liquidation or anything like that, but I think we'll definitely see some kind of scooping up of these smaller game companies.
Yeah, I think the experience I have from China and about the regulations and all of this, and we've been following them for some years, not only for games but everything. What happens in China is that you can never kind of know what to expect, and you better be prepared for it, and that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I think that's everything touched on there that I wanted to sort of ask about. So thank you very much for joining me on this. It was really interesting and very insightful, and I hope everybody watching has learned something and had a really interesting hour as well. We will be back for another roundtable session in a fortnight on July the 28th at the regular time of 4 p.m. BST, where we'll be discussing the death of the IDFA, another thing that is going to affect iOS across the world, not just in China. So please join us for that. But for now, thank you ever so much for joining us, and thank you again to the panelists. And we'll see you another time. Goodbye.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.